In my previous life, my wife suddenly suffered a heart attack and was rushed to the hospital by a colleague. By the time I arrived, she had already passed away. The blow was unbearable. I fainted on the spot. When I woke again, my wife had already been cremated. There wasn't even time for me to grieve before debt collectors came knocking on my door. Only then did I discover that my wife had accumulated millions in loans, and according to her will, I was the sole heir. 10 years later, I was hunched over picking up trash on the streets. That was when I saw my wife, who was supposed to be dead, driving a luxury car and laughing with her first love. She smiled at me, tossed down a $100 bill, and thanked me for my efforts. My body, already worn out from years of exhaustion, collapsed right there, and I died on the spot from anger. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to the day of my wife's heart attack. Chapter 1. Brother-in-law, you need to restrain your grief and take care of yourself. We did our best to save her, but Sister Melissa still... Gloria, Melissa's best friend and attending physician, spoke regretfully, using medical terms I didn't understand. She helped me sit down on the sofa. Brother-in-law, you better not look. I'm afraid you won't be able to bear it. I glanced at my reflection in the glass opposite me. My face was still youthful, without the scars of long-term labor on my hands. After a few deep breaths, I finally confirmed it. I had been reborn. In my previous life, when I first received the news of Melissa Wu's heart attack, I rushed to the hospital, running 3 red lights on the way, but still arrived a step too late. Holding her death certificate, I was consumed with regret, banging my head against the wall, blaming myself for not personally driving Melissa to work that day. Perhaps it was my grief, or perhaps it was from banging my head. But I fainted in the hospital. When I woke up, Melissa had already been cremated, leaving me with nothing but a small urn of ashes. I hugged that urn at home, refusing to eat or drink. But instead of peace, lawyers representing loan companies arrived at my door. It was then I found out I was the sole heir in Melissa's will. I tried to sort through the financial situation, but soon discovered that Melissa's company had been sold off by my mother-in-law, Laura, leaving me with millions in loans. Soon after, the court forcibly auctioned off our house. I had nowhere to go. When I turned to Laura for help, she refused to even see me. The days that followed were unbearable. I lived in a small shed while debt collectors came knocking almost every day. To survive and repay the debts, I worked 4 jobs daily. Yet, even after court enforcement, I could barely make ends meet. I endured illness without treatment, suffering through each day. Until one day, while picking up trash, I saw Melissa again after 10 years. She was driving a car, laughing happily with her first love. I ran closer, unable to believe my eyes. Melissa didn't even try to hide her identity. She mocked me for looking 70 when I was only 40, then tossed me a $100 bill, thanking me for my efforts over the past decade. I died on the spot from sheer anger as Melissa drove away, indifferent to me. Thinking back on it now, I made a decision. In my previous life, you faked your death. This time, I will make sure you truly die. Chapter 2. Gloria kept urging me to drink water, but I came to my senses and refused. In my previous life, I had fainted right after drinking that same glass of water. I was almost certain something had been slipped into it to make me miss Melissa's cremation. I put the glass down and walked toward Melissa's bedside, ignoring Gloria's attempts to stop me. Lifting the sheet, I saw Melissa's face. Her complexion was rosy, her breathing steady. In my previous life, I had been too grief-stricken, too foolish to notice this. This time, I raised my hand and slapped her hard across the face. Melissa didn't move an inch. Clearly, she was afraid I would find out the truth and had been anesthetized. That only made my plan easier. Gloria screamed, realizing I might have discovered Melissa's act. Brother-in-law, you can't be so harsh even if you're angry. We can explain everything. The pain of my previous life surged back, but I didn't stop. I struck Melissa hard, again and again, seeing Gloria about to break down. I put on an act, pretending to be furious with Melissa for not taking care of herself. I told you not to stay up late. To get a checkup. Why didn't you listen? What am I supposed to do now that you've left me alone? Gloria, believing I was just venting my grief, thought I hadn't discovered anything. But as she watched how harshly I was striking Melissa, she grew nervous. Brother-in-law, take it easy. Sister Melissa will feel pain. I stopped and looked at her coldly. Why, Gloria? Do newly dead people feel pain? Gloria swallowed, instantly regretting her words. She forced an awkward smile. No, She couldn't finish her sentence. I ignored her, pulling out my phone. Yes, I want to donate organs here, just died recently. Come quickly. Gloria panicked, trying to stop me, but instead quickly pulled out her own phone and sent a message. She couldn't move, but tears began streaming down her face. I gently wiped them away. Already crying? Don't worry. You'll have plenty of time to cry once you're in the crematorium. My phone kept ringing nonstop. It was calls from Gloria and Laura. But right now, I was nothing more than a grieving man who had just lost his wife, and I had no intention of answering. Chapter 8. Thanks to the driver's speeding, we arrived at the crematorium in 20 minutes, a trip that normally took half an hour. But today, the place was crowded, and it would be at least an hour before Melissa's turn. I paced anxiously before finally approaching the person in charge. My wife died suddenly of a heart attack. My mother-in-law fainted when she heard the news and is now being resuscitated in the hospital. I need to get back to her quickly. Please let me cremate my wife first. I don't want my mother-in-law to suffer too. The staff member hesitated. He had never encountered someone wanting to cut in line for cremation. I understand you're in a hurry, he said, but others have been waiting too. It's not fair to let you cut in line. Please, help me out. I'm an orphan. My wife and mother-in-law have been very good to me. I can't lose my mother-in-law too. With that added incentive, Melissa successfully cut the line. Within 10 minutes, she was pushed into the cremation chamber. Just as the staff was about to press the incineration button, I stopped him. I couldn't allow him to become an accomplice. No. I wanted to take my revenge personally. After my strong insistence, the staff stepped aside and agreed to let me press the button myself. At that exact moment, anxious voices echoed from the entrance. Stop! Stop! Don't cremate her! Laura, possibly still under the effects of medication, or perhaps just from the shock, collapsed at the door. Stop! Bring my daughter out! Gloria rushed forward, grabbing my hand as I was about to press the button. Brother-in-law, wait! Aunt Wu has something to say to Melissa. Panting heavily, Laura shouted hoarsely, Get out! I won't let you cremate my daughter. I'll do it myself. Take her out. Even at this critical moment, they still wanted to continue their fake death plan. I dropped to my knees, speaking sorrowfully. Mom, Melissa is gone. Let's let her rest in peace. I am Melissa's husband. I won't leave. Our quarrel drew the attention of many onlookers. What kind of tragic play is this? One of the staff muttered. The crematorium is no place for nonsense. He moved to press the incineration button himself. Gloria and Laura, desperate, lunged forward to stop him, their faces twisted in panic. Startled, the staff instinctively stepped aside. And so it was Gloria and Laura themselves who fell onto the button, instantly igniting the flames that engulfed Melissa. Chapter 9. Ah! Ah! Two screams echoed through the crematorium. Everyone turned toward Gloria and Laura, but I kept my eyes fixed on Melissa inside the chamber. By then, the anesthesia must have completely worn off. I vaguely saw her mouth open, her hand stretching out. But the commotion outside was too loud, and no one noticed. It wasn't until a full minute later that people turned back to the crematorium. The staff pointed inside, whispering in amazement. This is the first time I've seen a hand reach so high. It really looks like a living person. Yeah. Usually there's only slight muscle reaction. Good thing it's daytime. Otherwise, I'd think it was a ghost. I wiped away non-existent tears, suppressing the urge to let my lips curl up, and spoke pitifully. My wife loved her mother-in-law the most. She must have heard her mother-in-law's voice and tried to sit up to see her one last time. I wiped my eyes and faced the crematorium. Rest in peace, my dear wife. Don't worry, I'll take good care of Mom. Then, lowering my voice, I added, and I'll make sure she joins you soon. Almost on cue, Melissa's hand fell back down, seemingly dead for good. I exhaled slowly. Relief washed over me as though the suffering of my past life had finally vanished. Gloria, ignoring the collapsed Laura, stumbled forward and stared in horror at the scene inside the chamber. No, no! She pressed the incineration button frantically. Why won't the fire stop? Put it out! The staff quickly pushed her aside. We understand you're grieving, but the dead cannot come back to life. Acting like this won't bring her peace. That's right, another added. This is an automated crematorium. Once it starts, it has to burn completely before it can be opened. Please, calm down. Chapter 10. Gloria, pale as a ghost, collapsed onto the floor. Her lips trembled. It's over. It's all over. She looked at me, eyes wild. Brother-in-law, why didn't you answer your phone when we called you? I sighed. I was too distraught to answer any calls. All I could think about was what to do now that Melissa is gone. Besides, cremation after death is normal procedure. Why were you trying so hard to stop it? Laura crawled toward me and clutched at my feet. You bastard! You killed my daughter. Give me back my daughter's life. I sighed again, but made no move to help her up. Instead, I raised the death certificate. Mom, I know you're upset, but Melissa's death has nothing to do with me. She died of a sudden heart attack, not because of anything I did. If you don't believe me, ask Gloria. She was the one who tried to save Melissa and issued this death certificate. Isn't that right, Gloria? I turned to look at her. Gloria was speechless. Should she admit Melissa wasn't dead? Then how had the death certificate been issued? Say Melissa was dead? Laura would never believe her. Laura suddenly lunged, wrapping her hands around Gloria's throat. It was you. You killed my daughter. She was alive and you issued a death certificate. Now she's been cremated. It's all your fault. Feigning shock, I covered my mouth. What, Mom? What are you saying? Melissa wasn't dead. I turned to look at the flame still consuming Melissa. No wonder. I thought I saw her fingers move when she entered the crematorium. I thought it was just my imagination. I can't believe it was real. Chapter 11. At my words, Gloria grabbed at her hair in despair. After a long struggle, she finally forced herself to speak. It's true. Melissa isn't dead. She was only anesthetized. If you had waited just a few more minutes, she would have woken up. I widened my eyes, escalating the situation further. What? Are you saying Melissa was cremated alive and conscious? The statement sent a shudder through everyone present. The staff turned pale. No wonder. Just after we started the fire, she suddenly reached out her hand. My God. This is murder. Hearing this, Laura rolled her eyes and fainted. I slapped Gloria hard across the face. Gloria, are you insane? How can you joke about something like this? My wife is dead, and you're making up lies. Stunned, Gloria stammered. I'm not lying, I sneered. Not lying? Then tell me, why was my wife anesthetized? Why did you issue a death certificate? If you're going to lie, at least make it believable. Gloria couldn't explain. The staff, overhearing, shook their heads. Believing she was only spouting nonsense, they returned to their work. As Melissa's cremation finished, I left the crematorium angrily, carrying her. Ashes. Before leaving, I turned back to Gloria. You scared Mom into fainting for no reason. You take her to the hospital. It wasn't that I didn't want to see Laura's reaction upon waking, but I had more important matters to deal with. Chapter 12, I placed Melissa's ashes prominently in the living room, then immediately contacted a lawyer to begin the process of inheriting Melissa's company and estate. In my previous life, grief had consumed me, and by the time I came to my senses, the company was gone. I couldn't make the same mistake again. If I didn't act quickly this time, Laura would seize control as soon as she woke up. I couldn't waste this second chance. After completing the paperwork, I thought about the millions in debt. Knowing Melissa, she wouldn't have simply handed all that money to Victor or Laura. I had already checked, and no such funds were under her name. That meant she must have hidden it. Tracing her spending records, I found a garage she had rented. When I went to the address, I discovered the stash of cash hidden there. Without delay, I contacted the bank and loan companies, paid off part of the interest, and began settling the loans. With everything done, I sprawled across the sofa, holding a glass of red wine. Looking at Melissa's photo on the wall, I smiled. Thank you, dear wife. Now I have money, a house, and a company, without debts. I'll live a carefree life, even better than in your previous one. Drinking heavily, I drifted into sleep on the sofa. The next morning, I was woken by a knock at the door. Rubbing my aching head, I opened it. Outside stood Gloria and Laura, accompanied by a man a few years older, Victor. His expression was angry, and in his arms was a 6- or 7-year-old boy who bore a striking resemblance to Melissa. So this was it. A child born before our marriage. No wonder Melissa had always refused to have children with me. She had already given birth to Victor's. The three of them looked haggard, with dark circles under their eyes, clearly from sleepless nights. Behind them stood several police officers. Chapter 13. Laura barged into the house, pointing at me furiously. Officer, this man cremated my daughter alive. Arrest him and cremate him too so he knows what it feels like. I had expected this performance, though not quite so soon. Sighing, I held up the death certificate. Mom, can you stop making such jokes? Officer, this is my wife's death certificate. My mom couldn't handle the loss and may be suffering from mental issues. The officer studied the certificate. This seems fine. I sighed again. My wife and I were married for 3 years. Our relationship was very strong. When she passed away, I didn't want her body to decay, so I cremated her immediately. Was that wrong? Laura clutched her chest. You're lying. My daughter despised you long ago. If Victor hadn't been unable to divorce back then, Melissa would never have married you out of spite. You did it on purpose. You cremated her out of turn just to get her inheritance and company. I confirmed it with the company yesterday. What else do you have to say? I looked incredulous, eyes red with tears. Mom, you can insult me, but my love for Melissa was real. If there were no feelings between us, why would she make me the sole heir of her estate? Laura couldn't answer. I pressed on. You say Melissa was still alive. But how could such a large hospital fail to determine if someone was dead or alive? Gloria told me herself that Melissa was brain dead and her heart had stopped. What living person is like that? Chapter 14. Laura signaled Gloria to speak, but Gloria kept her head bowed. Of course. If she admitted the death certificate was fake, the consequences would be disastrous. It was safer to stick with the lie. The situation reached a deadlock. Victor tugged on Laura's sleeve, and she finally stopped. Sighing, he spoke. Melissa really wasn't dead. I'm Melissa's boyfriend. We broke up years ago because of a misunderstanding, and she married you out of spite. I recently divorced and came with my child to find her. She realized she still loved me and wanted to fake her death to leave you. He hesitated, then added, but don't blame Melissa. She didn't do it to hurt you. She was a kind person. Now that Melissa is gone, we just hope you can accept this child and give him the inheritance he deserves. I took a sip of water and mimicked Laura's tone. "You're lying." Then I sadly turned to Laura. "Mom, I know you didn't get along with Melissa. She didn't leave you anything in her will, so you brought this child to frame Melissa and claim her inheritance. Isn't that right?" Laura was almost driven to madness by my words, but for the sake of money she held back. "You're lying. I got along very well with Melissa. This is her child, I'm absolutely sure." I took out Melissa's will. "Mom, why are you lying? If you got along well with Melissa, why isn't your name in her will? Why did she leave everything to me?" Laura was speechless. Victor hesitated. He couldn't exactly say that Melissa made me her heir just to saddle me with debts. Chapter 15, I glanced at the child standing behind Victor and smirked inwardly. So that's why my wife, who had pretended to be good for 3 years, suddenly stopped pretending, because her first love and son came back. However, I didn't feel sad since I'd already died once. I said calmly, "You claim this child is Melissa's. Then please provide evidence such as a legally recognized paternity test or a birth certificate." Victor and Laura were taken aback. "There's no paternity test because the child was born at home, so there's no birth certificate. But he is Melissa's child." I waved my hand. "Officer, do you see what's happening here? They know my wife has been cremated and brought a child to claim the inheritance. They even falsely accuse me of cremating my wife alive. Their statements are completely contradictory." Laura, anxious, said, "I can take a DNA test with the child to prove I am his grandmother, which would indirectly prove he's Melissa's child." The officer shook his head. "That won't suffice. It only proves you are related to the child, but it doesn't establish Melissa's relation to the child. Even if it did, it wouldn't prove that Melissa was your only child." I held back my laughter. Part of the reason I insisted on cremating Melissa quickly was to avoid such situations. It turned out to be the right move. Laura and Victor exchanged glances, and Victor gritted his teeth. "It doesn't matter whose child it is. Melissa wasn't dead. He cremated her alive. He's a murderer. He can't inherit Melissa's estate." Victor was right about that. But he needed to prove I was a murderer first. Chapter 16. I suddenly looked at Gloria. "Gloria, tell us, was Melissa dead or alive? You're a doctor with a family. Think carefully before you speak. You may not remember, but I do. It was you and Mom who pressed the incineration button. If Melissa was alive, then you two are the murderers." I turned their actions of trying to stop the cremation into pressing the button on purpose. "Laura didn't even have time to call me a liar." Gloria gritted her teeth, avoiding Laura and Victor's gaze. "She was really dead." I breathed a sigh of relief, but Victor raised his phone. "I suspected you'd lie, so I brought evidence." Victor played a video on his phone showing him, Melissa, Gloria, and Laura sitting on a couch discussing the fake death plan. Melissa's voice, as disgusting as in my previous life, came from the phone. "I'll get anesthetized. You find a way to knock out my husband and tell him I've been cremated. I'll give you $1 million once it's done." The video wasn't complete and didn't include the part where they discussed making me shoulder the debts. Gloria crouched down at a loss for words. I didn't know." Victor seemed relieved. "I wasn't lying. You killed Melissa, so you should go to jail. The inheritance should go to Auntie." I acted frightened and didn't speak, brewing my emotions to appear genuinely sad, not pretending. "Officer, I want to report them. These 3 planned my wife's fake death without telling me. I was devastated and didn't notice she was alive." I pointed at Gloria and Laura. "They knew I planned to donate my wife's organs and cremate her, but they didn't tell me she wasn't dead. They did it on purpose so I would unknowingly cremate my wife and then come to claim the inheritance." Chapter 17. I asked Laura and Victor. I knew my wife had passed away, so I followed the normal procedure to cremate her. Was that wrong? Clearly it wasn't. They hadn't expected me to speak so clearly. They thought I'd break down upon learning the truth and be easily manipulated. But I had already died once. I was no longer the naive and foolish person I was in my previous life. From the moment I woke up, I knew exactly how I would handle each step ahead. With a choked voice, I continued. I wanted to donate her organs, Mom. You were there. Why didn't you tell me the truth when you refused? If it was just about a divorce, why wouldn't I agree? You deceived Melissa, made her believe your lies, and chose to fake her death. Then you deliberately cremated Melissa, making me the villain who sent his own wife to the crematorium. How cruel can you be? Laura stammered. Melissa insisted that you must believe it, so I had to stop the organ donation and couldn't tell you the truth. I took out my phone. Then what about this? You called me on my way to the crematorium, proving you knew I was going to cremate Melissa. I was too heartbroken to answer, but why didn't you send a message? When I got to the crematorium, Melissa hadn't been cremated yet. Why didn't you tell me the truth then? Instead, you caused a scene and pressed the incineration button yourselves? Laura and Gloria were speechless. But I knew they were confident they had time. They thought they could distract me at the crematorium and still succeed. Desperation breeds bold moves. This drama ended without a conclusion, each side standing firm. The police took us all to the station for temporary detention, pending investigation. Chapter 18. After a few days of investigation, the police found out that I was, indeed, a simple husband, unaware of Melissa's affair. I never questioned Melissa's business trips, social engagements, or checked her phone. Neighbors, friends, and colleagues confirmed that we were a loving couple with no signs of discord. The home surveillance showed no arguments between us. The police couldn't know I'd been reborn. Based on the evidence, how could such a loving husband kill his wife? Laura, Gloria, and Victor's statements were full of holes. They had countless opportunities to tell me Melissa wasn't dead, but waited until after the cremation, especially Gloria and Laura, who saw Melissa enter the crematorium but still didn't speak up, even pressing the button themselves. They claimed it was unintentional, but who would believe that? Not only that, the initial fake death incident was already extremely alarming. Thus, the investigation concluded that I was an innocent, grieving husband, while the other three were charged with attempted murder. 6 months later, they were found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment. Laura wasn't so fortunate. She died of a heart attack upon hearing her sentence. Gloria's husband divorced her and left with their children, devastated by her actions. Rumor has it, Gloria attempted suicide several times in prison but failed each time. As for Victor, he contacted me several times, begging me to visit him in prison. When I ignored him, he started writing letters pleading with me to raise the child, for Melissa's sake. I sent him a letter back informing him that the child had been sent to an orphanage. I am no saint. I couldn't raise the child of someone who conspired to kill my wife. I then sold the house and used the inheritance Melissa left me to buy a larger, better-located property. I kept Melissa's ashes with me, believing that if there is an afterlife, she would see how happy I am now.